Let's start with something simple, but not easy. When something irritates you, when someone disrespects you, when life presses in on your nerves and instincts, what's your first move? Most people react instinctively, emotionally, automatically, like a match to gasoline. It happens fast, without thought. And in that moment, without even realizing it, you give your power away. You hand over control of your inner state to the outside world. Now think about that. Really think. What if every time you react, you are volunteering your control to something or someone else? A rude driver, a delayed email, a coworker's tone, your partner's silence. Suddenly your peace, your clarity, your purpose, they're all up for grabs. Not because someone took them from you, but because you handed them over. It's the ability to feel the fire rising inside of you, and instead of letting it burn everything down, you sit with it, you observe it, and you choose not to let it lead. Now let's be clear, I'm not talking about suppression. This isn't about pretending you don't feel anger, fear, disappointment, or hurt. Those emotions are human. They're not the problem. The problem is when we confuse feeling something with obeying it. When we feel offended and believe that means we must respond, or we feel anxious and assume we have to act. Emotional discipline is what creates that critical pause, the space between emotion and reaction, where wisdom lives. Psychologically speaking, this is the foundation of self-regulation. It's the difference between being driven by your amygdala, your brain's threat response center, or being guided by your prefrontal cortex, the seat of reason, judgment, and higher thinking. Every reaction you don't give into is like a muscle flexed in the gym. Over time, that gap between trigger and response gets wider. You don't just become calmer, you become dangerous in the best possible way. Untouchable. Not because you feel nothing, but because you've learned how to channel it. Philosophers have been teaching this for centuries. The Stoics, for instance, believed that the ultimate form of power was self-mastery. Epictetus said, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That's not a motivational poster quote. That's a blueprint for control, for owning your life. Because the truth is, no one can control everything around them. The news, your boss, your past, the economy, those are all outside of you. But how you react? That's yours. Always. We live in a culture of overreaction. Every notification is a demand. Every disagreement is a war. We are constantly provoked, and often we comply. But reacting to everything means you're led by everything, and that's no way to lead your life. If you want to control your direction, you have to control your responses, especially when it's hard. Here's the reality. Emotionally reactive people are predictable, and predictable people are easy to manipulate. If I know that a certain word, a certain look, or a certain silence will throw you off your center, I can steer you anywhere. But if you're grounded, if you've trained yourself to observe before you respond, then you become less of a puppet and more of a presence. Think about the people you respect most, the ones who walk into a room and instantly command attention. They're not the loudest, they're the calmest, the most centered, the ones who don't react to nonsense because they're focused on substance. They've cultivated emotional discipline, not because they never feel anything, but because they've learned not to be ruled by what they feel. Now don't get me wrong, this takes practice, this takes awareness, it takes failing at it over and over again, and then showing up the next day determined to do better. It's not about perfection, it's about consistency. You train emotional discipline the way you train your body. You don't wait for the crisis to start preparing. You practice in the quiet moments. You catch yourself in traffic. You pause when your kid says something that frustrates you. You breathe when your phone rings with that person you'd rather not speak to. You resist the urge to prove your point in that text thread. You stop and ask yourself, do I want to win this moment? Or do I want to control my direction? And here's what's wild. When you stop reacting, you start seeing. You start noticing what others miss. You see patterns, not just provocations. You see intention behind words. You see opportunities where before there were only threats. Because when your mind is no longer clouded by reaction, it becomes a clear lens, and that lens changes everything. You see, emotional discipline isn't about being cold. It's not about becoming robotic or unfeeling. It's about becoming sharp, focused, intentional. It's about knowing the difference between what deserves your energy and what's just noise. It's about protecting your peace like it's sacred, because it is. So the next time something hits you, something sharp, sudden, unfair, don't ask, how do I feel about this? Ask, what do I want to do with this? That one shift changes the game. You go from victim to leader, from triggered to centered, from reactive to powerful. Let's be honest. Most of us spend an incredible amount of energy on things we can't control. We stress over how someone else perceives us. We spiral over a job interview that hasn't even happened yet. We check the news 5 times a day, hoping the world will suddenly stabilize. We obsess over outcomes, over reactions, over the million variables that fall completely outside our influence. And we wonder why we feel anxious, frustrated, burned out. But here's the simple truth. The more you try to control what's uncontrollable, the more you lose control of yourself. Now, I get it. It's human nature. We want certainty. We want to know how things will turn out. We want people to like us, timing to be perfect, and plans to go exactly how we envision them. And so we wait for perfect to occur. We wait for too much of the unknown, and it molds who we are. We conform to the ceilings that we've been given, and we wait for perfect to occur. We wait for too much to be perfect, or we work up to a certain level of success to achieve the same goals. But life doesn't owe us predictability. People don't owe us agreement, and outcomes rarely follow our scripts. So the question becomes, where do we focus if not on outcomes? Where does real control begin? It begins inside, with your mindset, with your actions, with your attention. Psychologists talk about something called the locus of control, your internal compass that determines whether you believe events in your life are shaped by external forces or by your own choices. People with an internal locus of control tend to be calmer, more confident, more resilient, not because life treats them better, but because they focus on what they can do, even when everything else is uncertain. Let's bring this down to earth. You can't control the traffic, but you can control how you show up when you're late. You can't control what someone else says in a meeting, but you can control how you respond. You can't control whether someone likes you, but you can control how you carry yourself with consistency and self-respect. When you stop trying to fix or manage everything around you and instead anchor yourself to your own behavior, your own effort, your own standards, that's where strength lives. This mindset isn't just about managing stress. It's about reclaiming your power. When you start filtering your focus through the lens of what is mine to own, your life simplifies. The noise dies down. Because now you're not trying to steer someone else's ship, you're mastering your own. And there's a kind of dignity in that. There's clarity. You're no longer performing for approval. You're no longer chasing validation in places where it was never going to be offered. You realize that control is not about domination. It's about direction. It's not about forcing people to agree with you. It's about deciding who you want to be and aligning your actions accordingly. There's also freedom in it. When you release the pressure to fix what was never yours, you find space to create what is. Your energy stops getting siphoned into dead ends, gossip, grudges, overthinking, comparison. And that energy can now be invested into what actually moves your life forward. Your work ethic, your presence, your health, your boundaries, your mindset. Philosophically, this goes all the way back to the Stoics again. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wasn't speaking in metaphors. He meant it literally. If you try to fight what is outside of your control, you become a slave to it. But if you turn inward, if you master what's yours, you rise above the chaos. And this isn't passive acceptance. This isn't just let it go without action. This is radical responsibility. It's about refusing to waste your time blaming circumstances, other people, or bad luck, and instead asking, what can I do next? It's not always fair, but it is always empowering. Let me give you an example. Say you're dealing with someone at work who's passive-aggressive, always undermining you subtly. Now, sure, you can stew over it. You can replay every comment in your mind. You can wait for them to change or for someone else to notice and fix it. Or you can decide how you want to handle it. You can document, address it directly, adjust your boundaries, protect your peace. That's what focusing on what you can control looks like in real time. It's active, it's deliberate, it's grounded in your power, not theirs. And here's the thing, when you start living this way, people notice. Not because you're controlling others, but because you're in control of yourself. You become the calmest person in the room. You stop reacting to every wave because you're anchored. People feel that. It's magnetic because it's rare. Now, does that mean you'll never be thrown off? No. You're human. Things will still catch you off guard. But emotional discipline, what we just talked about, paired with focused control, what we're talking about now, is how you return to center, faster, stronger, clearer. You'll still feel the weather, but it won't decide your direction. And that's the whole point. Control isn't about creating a life free of problems. It's about building a mindset that can handle problems. It's about trusting yourself, not because you think nothing will go wrong, but because you know who you'll be when it does. So the next time you feel that pull to overthink, to obsess, to fix everything and everyone, pause. Ask yourself, is this mine to control? If it is, act with clarity. If it's not, let it go without guilt. Let me tell you something most people get completely wrong. Silence is not weakness. We live in a world that rewards noise. We are constantly told to speak up, clap back, have the last word. We equate silence with submission, with passivity, with losing. But let's flip that idea on its head. Because the truth is, silence, when chosen deliberately, is one of the most powerful tools you'll ever learn to use. See, silence isn't about saying nothing. It's about saying something later, something smarter, or sometimes saying nothing ever, because not everything deserves your voice. There's a difference between silence out of fear and silence out of strategy. The first is avoidance. The second is strength. Think about the last time someone pushed your buttons, whether online, in a meeting, or at the dinner table. You felt that urge rise up, didn't you? That tightening in the chest, the instant mental draft of a comeback. You wanted to defend, explain, correct. That's the ego flaring. It wants to prove something. But silence? Silence says, I don't owe you my energy just because you're demanding it. That is power. Let's go deeper. Psychologically reactive communication is driven by the limbic system. The emotional center of the brain. It wants resolution right now. It wants relief. But that kind of instant reaction usually leads to regret. Silence, on the other hand, engages the executive functions of the prefrontal cortex. That's where emotional regulation lives. That's where long-term strategy is born. When you choose silence in a moment of emotional intensity, you're doing something rare. You're overriding the need for validation in the moment in favor of stability in the long run. You're saying, I am not controlled by you. I'm in control of me. There's a quote I think about often. Don't raise your voice, improve your argument. And sometimes improving your argument means not making one at all, especially when the conversation isn't about truth but ego. You've seen this, two people arguing, not to understand but to win, to be louder, sharper, more seen. But what if the win is not engaging at all? There's a certain calm that comes from knowing who you are, from not needing to prove it at every turn. And that calm is intimidating. Silence makes people uncomfortable because it forces them to sit with themselves. And if they were looking to provoke you, your stillness disarms them. It takes away the one thing they were hoping to control, your reaction. Philosophers and spiritual leaders across cultures have always understood this. In Taoism, they talk about wu wei, the concept of effortless action, of knowing when not to act. In Christianity, there's the principle of turning the other cheek, not as surrender, but as discipline. In Buddhism, mindfulness teaches us that not every thought is worth voicing. Silence is universal in its power because it transcends the need to dominate. It speaks a language only the secure can understand. Now, I'm not telling you to stay silent in the face of injustice or to suppress your truth. That's not strength. That's fear wearing a mask. What I'm saying is choose your voice the way a master chooses their tools. Intentionally, purposefully. Not every situation deserves a reply. Not every insult deserves a response. Not every invitation to chaos needs an RSVP. When you speak from a place of calm rather than impulse, your words carry weight. People feel the difference. There's gravity in restraint. The person who doesn't need to speak every time they're provoked is the person you watch closely when they do speak. Because when they speak, it matters. Silence also gives you space. It's a filter. When you resist the urge to respond instantly, you allow your thoughts to settle, you gain clarity. You see what's really being said, not just what your emotions tell you is being said. And then take solace in the silence of the moment. You see what's really being said, not just what your emotions tell you is being said. They tell you the truth of your situation. You see what's really being said. That moment of stillness becomes your edge. It's where you regain your footing, your insight, your authority. In conflict, silence is often your best move. Not as a weapon, but as a pause, a reset. It can de-escalate a fight, redirect a conversation, or simply protect your peace. And sometimes, silence is the boundary, the refusal to participate in dysfunction. You don't need to scream that you're done, you just stop responding. That in itself becomes a message. And yes, silence requires confidence. It requires patience. It requires the inner stability to be misunderstood, mischaracterized, even judged, and still choose not to react. That's hard. But the people who master this, who learn to hold their center even while the world spins, they're the ones who end up steering the ship. You don't have to show up to every argument you're invited to. You don't have to correct every false narrative. You don't have to react just because someone else wants a show. Your peace is not public property. And when you understand that, you stop performing and start leading. Silence is not retreat. It is presence. It's the conscious decision to protect your energy, to own your power, to respond with intention instead of noise. So the next time someone comes at you sideways or life throws chaos your way, try this. Say nothing just for a moment. Sit with the discomfort. Breathe. Observe. Let the need to prove something pass. Then, if you choose to speak, let it come from a place that's calm, clear, and rooted. And if you choose not to speak at all, that's a choice too. A powerful